Hey, welcome everybody to another video review. So I haven't done one of these in a while because normally I use my iPhone to do the recording and I'm behind the phone. And I haven't done a video for like a month or so, so I do apologize a little bit for that, for the those of you who actually are subscribed to my channel. As you know, I've mentioned a couple times in the past, this is not what I do for a living. It's sort of my hobby. It's just something I like to do in my spare time, and I'll go in fits and starts. I don't know anything about YouTube algorithms or how to turn this into a business so I can have a lot more subscribers. I don't know any of those tricks. This is less a way of making money and more just a way for me personally to create a little record of my hobbies and my passions and what I enjoy, and maybe something for other people with similar interests to share with my family to look back later on when we're all older, and wiser. I do apologize in the sense that my voice is not going to carry as well because I'm farther away from the phone, so you might have to turn on the volume a little bit. I don't want to scream too loudly. And I have videos from all different things, right? I have some videos where I'm talking about FAQs and walkthroughs for video games I really happen to like at the time. I have videos of miniature paint-ups, videos of big statues, of props, all sorts of things. Even Disney dolls, I think I have a few. And I think that probably winds up hurting me because, again, I think for YouTube channel success, you want to be focused and deliver very methodically and all the time, and stick to one niche. And if you're, for instance, a Disney doll collector, you're probably not going to be very interested in something like this. And meanwhile, if you're a big statue collector, you just won't care at all about Disney dolls. But again, the channel, I think one of the things I kind of wanted to make my channel is very eclectic and shows my personal tastes and how I love and enjoy so many different things, from Swarovski crystal to Disney to of course statues and props and everything in between. And so hopefully if you just are entertained enough by it, you'll see stuff that you hardly ever see anywhere else, and then you'll look at other things and it just kind of widens your horizons. So again, apologize I haven't put up a video in a while. Decided to kind of come back with a bang, and the reason, of course, is because I work in a hospital. That's my so-called day job, and you can imagine with the COVID-19 pandemic that's been sweeping this country for the better part of the last month. A lot of us are still working. It was a little bit stressful, very busy, and also just sort of a little bit depressing, to be honest with you. And then my family is, of course, in sheltering in place, and so it's kind of hard to find the time or the space to do reviews like this when your whole family is just kind of hanging around, that type of thing. So it's nighttime, they're asleep, and it took a piece like this to, I guess, bring me back to make the video. So why am I doing it sitting here? I think it's self-evident. If I were to try to do my normal review, this thing's so massive that I just wouldn't be able to really do much justice to it. So I have the phone sort of set up. You can see how I am, and I'm essentially sitting right behind this piece. So it is really that massive. I put my hand in front, you can get an idea of how big this thing is. So let's talk about it. I mean, this is a custom piece. Again, out of respect for the producer, I won't mention his name or his company. I have a couple of pieces by him, and this is from a line that he's been working on called the X-Men versus the Sentinel line. There's quite a few pieces with different characters. There's a Magneto, which I missed. I joined the custom group too late for that, as well as a Cyclops, which I missed. But I got a Psylocke, which I reviewed in the past. And this is the second piece I have in the Sentinel line this is the Cyclops, obviously, versus the Sentinel, and in that line, usually you'll have X-Men fighting against either the head or the two hands. I think there's 6 pieces formally in the line. The 2 heads showcase Rogue and Magneto, okay, destroying each head, and then the 4 hands are Cyclops, Psylocke, Iceman, and who's the 4th hand? Trying to remember. Psylocke, Cyclops. Who's the 4th hand? I don't have that hand. Iceman. I'm starting to. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit senile, I guess. They're so striking. It's kind of surprising to me that I would forget. Well, it'll come back to me, hopefully, because usually I wouldn't forget. There's also a Beast versus Sentinel in the series, and that's actually the chest, not the head. And there's one of Wolverine fighting a Sentinel head, but that's not part of this line. So this line, so far as I can recall, has 7. What am I thinking of? Okay, yeah, it's getting late at night. So Magneto is not destroying the head. I think I misspoke. Colossus is destroying the head. Magneto is destroying the other hand. So you have Rogue and Colossus doing a head each, destroying a head each, and then the 4 hands, 2 hands for each Sentinel head is Psylocke, Iceman, Cyclops, and Magneto. So I'm missing of the 7 pieces. I'm missing Colossus, which is the other head, and I'm missing Magneto, which again is completely beyond my price range. Both Magneto and Colossus are very, very expensive now. They were sold out much earlier than before I joined. But getting 5 out of the 7 is certainly nothing to be ashamed of. That's pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with what I got. Each one of them are beautiful pieces of art, and as you can imagine, look, each one of them are huge pieces, truly Grail level collectibles. And again, in terms of confusion, there's a Wolverine series called the Wolverine Chronicles, which is also an amazing series that has some of the best pieces ever made. There was the Chronicles phase 1, so to speak, with a Weapon X in the snow, then phase 2 with the old classic Wolverine fighting a Wendigo. This is one of the most sought after statues in the hobby today. And then phase 3 is Wolverine in his, I think, yellow costume, but the more modern yellow costume, over a Sentinel head. And that Sentinel head is a completely different design from this series. So a lot of people, I think, got confused. I thought that Wolverine was part of the line, but he's not, okay? So for now, the line is a Colossus, Rogue, Iceman, Cyclops, Magneto, Psylocke, and then Beast. And correct me if I'm wrong for that, but I think that's my understanding of the line. So this is Cyclops. He's released in stages. So I'm going to try to just kind of talk a little bit about Cyclops in general, and then after that, I'll actually go and take the phone off of the stand and then go in for some close-up views. This could go quite a while. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot to this piece. So to start with, you're going to have this really nice base. Hopefully, as I'm turning it, you can get a feel for, again, how massive it is. The hand is just huge. I think there's some question whether this is quote-unquote quarter scale or not. This company or this custom group, the producer tends to make statues just a little bit bigger than quarter scale. We call that 3.5 scale maybe. I think he wants the extra size just to showcase some of the detail, to appreciate that. But this hand is really, really big, gigantic. Is it oversized? I mean, I don't really know. I don't really particularly care. I mean, it is a Sentinel hand, and you expect that to be very, very big. A Sentinel should be able to crush a X-Men with his bare hands. And if you look at that, you can see that the hand is about the size that you can imagine it grabbing Cyclops, for instance. Okay. It starts off with, let's look at the base. You have him on this nice rubble, the base is like half rubble, and again, the conceit is that the hand is, kind of punching up through the ground to engage in Cyclops. One of the fingers, I'm gonna stand up now, so that you can appreciate that I'm not one of those lazy YouTubers who doesn't wear pants. I do have shorts on. So getting up, hopefully you can appreciate that. Okay, it's gonna be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to, what's the best way? I'm gonna turn it around this way. Just go nice 360. So hopefully you can see this here, the thumb over here has a little bit being sliced off by Cyclops laser, and then it's fallen right here on the base. So this thumb has been sliced off and it's landed and crashed on the base right here. So I'm looking to see, hopefully you can appreciate that. And don't worry, at the end of this we'll do some close-ups. So a lot of what I'm doing, I have to actually stand up, by the way, just to sort of give you this overview. And then the thumb sliced off, and then his Optic Blast has sliced through. Let me see if I can show you from this angle right here. I think that's a pretty good angle. So you can see that the Optic Blast has basically sliced through the top third of the palm of the hand, and it's en route to essentially slicing the entire top off. This is an amazing feat of design and also sculpture. And I'll go over the sculptor Franco Carlissimo a little bit. I mean, he's the one that this producer is sort of the go-to guy. He commissions, or he used to commission maybe 4 or 5 years ago from different sculptors. But just because of the way things are, some of those sculptors maybe not as reliable, or they're too busy, or they have relationships with other companies. But Franco, did I say Francisco? It's Franco. It's really late at night, so forgive me if I get a little bit confused or misspeak. But Franco Carlissimo, from Spain, is an amazing sculptor. He works mostly, I believe, digitally, and he's the guy who has done a lot of work for this company. And he's an amazingly ambitious sculptor, so he created this beautiful piece. So again, the conceit and the design is that Cyclops is landing on the ground, and he's just leaping onto the ground, so you can see him right as he's about to touch down. And as he does so, the Optic Blast comes out, it slices the hand in half, and you can kind of feel again the power of the blast. This is an amazingly dynamic idea. So when you talk about, for instance, what makes a statue special, and while I'm talking, I'm just going to sort of turn him around, rotate him around. When you talk a little bit about what makes a statue special, it starts off with the ambition of the piece, right? Like, how ambitious are you? And I think different folks have different feelings about that. There's some people who love simplicity. They like a museum pose. They like the work to be about the statue itself. Or maybe the most they would prefer is to have the statue have a so-called Captain Morgan pose, where one leg is slightly elevated and is resting on the environment, that type of thing. And they don't want the base, for instance, to overshadow the actual character. And that's fine. I mean, that's a personal, that's sort of like a personal decision. It's not a decision, like, just a personal opinion. Like, some people just, they like that, okay? But for me personally, I always felt that, I felt that museum poses are sort of a vestige of what classical statues were about. I mean, way back in the old days, we're looking at over 25 years ago, maybe, around that time, when we started with the 1/6 scale statues that Randy Bowen put out. They were all just, 12, anywhere from 12 to 18 inches. He got a little bit more ambitious as time went on, but it was just basically dozens of Marvel characters in essentially museum poses. They would sometimes have their arms flexed or something like that, or they would do something but most of the time it was just like, they were just standing there. In a lot of older sideshow premium formats, again, of the Marvel line, also essentially shows them just in sort of these museum poses. And so to me personally, I feel like while they certainly have their place, I feel like that's already been done and done really very well. You have various characters in their museum poses, both fully sculpted, 1/6 and later on 1/4 scale. You have amazing detail. Prime 1, I think, has sculpted every Batman character under the face of the sun in every iteration, from even the crazy ones like the Batman Who Laughs. And a lot of their pieces are by and large museum type poses, with some variations. But again, in general, they're museum poses, incredible detail. They're standing there. They're 1/3 scale, huge, with large bases. So you've gone from 1/6 to 1/4 to 1/3. You have mixed media, and I just feel like that's all been done already. In many iterations, many different forms. And so for me, when I think about getting a piece, I have quite a few of those museum pieces, and I feel like they're a little bit boring, and they can only go so far. And I think there's some characters that work better in museum pose versus other characters where maybe the essence of that character might be more action-packed. So Cyclops is one of those very interesting pieces, because the question that you always have to ask yourself is, how are you going to display the essence of Cyclops? Like, what is Cyclops when you boil him down to his essence? What defines him? And obviously for Cyclops, what defines him is the Optic Blast, okay? When you have a character like Wolverine, you have claws, blood, a brawler, fighting. That's why there's a lot of Wolverines with him. Maybe in mid-heel, he's got arrows and daggers sticking in him. His claws are bared. His teeth is bared. He's bloodied, and you have a huge rent sometimes in his face. So that's the essence of Wolverine, correct? And for so for a Colossus, for instance, it's about his strength, his brute strength. For Juggernaut's the size. For the Hulk, obviously, it's this overwhelming power and strength. But Cyclops is a little bit tricky because, what really defines him, if you, have followed him in comics, and I admit I haven't followed for a long, long time. I grew up as a teenager in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. So I read the Jim Lee era X-Men a bit, starting with their X-Men #1 when they were fighting Magneto and all that. And so the Cyclops, at least in that era, was defined, of course, by his abilities, the Optic Blast, but also by his intelligence, his leadership. And those are not qualities that are very easy to translate into sculptural format. And his power is really, really difficult because until recently, I don't think it was very practical to sculpt in statue form an Optic Blast. They've been doing that in the past, just in the last couple of years. They've been trying to be more ambitious. Can you sculpt an explosion, for instance? Can you sculpt a smoke effect? These are incredibly ambitious things to do. And a lot of times, I think they don't work as often as they work, and more times than not, I don't think they work very well. There was one recent one, which I love, by the way. I haven't done a review yet, but I will eventually, is of Spider-Man, and he's like supposed to be leaping over this, beam, and there's an explosion, and inevitably, done incorrectly, the explosion just looks like painted popcorn or something like that, and that's one of the problems. And so for Cyclops, how do you really, adequately sculpt his Optic Blast without it looking silly? And I don't think a lot of producers were able to figure it out. If you look at Sideshow, you look at XM, they don't bother sculpting the beam a lot. They just sculpt Cyclops himself, sometimes in action pose, sometimes in museum pose. And the most they've ever done to try to kind of showcase the blast is showing his head leaning, or his finger, the left finger pressing, or he's screaming, or he's like looking up at the sky, but they don't really put the blast in there. And then you have some customs who do attempt to do it, but then it comes off not, in my opinion, looking very good. And then you realize why Sideshow or XM have not tried to do it, because most of the time the Optic Blast is pure energy, right? It's like energy exploding from his eyes. And while you can do that in special effects on movies very well, or even the comics, of course, very well, sculpting that is really difficult to do. You basically have to do some sort of translucency of some type. And then how is that going to work out? Because that blast is going off, it's infinite, right? It's like basically a laser. In the comics and in the movies, they never show Cyclops utilizing the Optic Blast without them demonstrating the destructive effect of it. And so the Optic Blast comes out and you see it pulverize a tank or destroy the environment. In statue form, that's really hard to do if you're going to stick with a simple base. You're going to stick with a museum pose, because if you're not going to show the Optic Blast, I think he looks a little bit awkward. Because again, we've had plenty of Cyclops just standing there with his visor on. If you sculpt him with the Optic Blast coming out, then where's it going? And you obviously can't show a real blast. It's like a lightsaber from Star Wars, right? There's no such thing as a real lightsaber. And so when you do these props, you have to put on like a translucent LED blade, which then turns it into a toy. And so if it can't go anywhere, you have to truncate it. And how are you going to truncate it without it looking, bottom line, silly? There are some Cyclops out there by different custom companies where they're very good, but then they'll show the blast, exploding the visor or whatever, but it just kind of stops there. It's just ragged, and you have to use your imagination. And so I think that's a problem. So I think Cyclops, it's like everything is a copycat, right? And I think especially in statues, I thought about a saying like how in the NBA, the National Basketball Association, this is a copycat league, or the NFL is a copycat league. And if something works, then everybody copies it because they all want to be successful. So statue collecting and the companies also have their own sort of copycat. And sometimes there'll be a character that's kind of hot, and when one person does it, all of a sudden everybody has to have their version of Cyclops. You have to have the Sideshow version, you have to have the XM version, and then some of the custom companies they each have to have their own stamp on Cyclops, right? And so that happened, I think, in the last maybe 6 months to 1 year. There's a lot of different Cyclops statues, both custom and licensed, both Marvel versus Capcom versions, as well as comic versions. And he's just very, very tricky because, in my opinion, if you want to distill him to the essence of his mutant power, to showcase him properly, you have to show the Optic Blast. And I don't think anybody's ever figured out how to do that without it looking cheesy or not very good. And that's why I have to give credit to the producer, and then for Franco for executing it, is I believe that in terms of the design, this is a work of genius. Now, he actually ingeniously created a situation where you can show the Optic Blast without it looking fake or silly, or as close as it comes to looking amazing. At least that's my opinion, and that's why I bought the statues, because this is the first Cyclops I saw that to me kind of distilled everything there's about him and showcased it perfectly. It's him leaping into battle, it shows his strength, amazing dynamic pose, all the things I look for in statues that matter to me. I like the fluidity of motion, I like how muscles move when they're jumping, when they're landing. I like anatomy in motion because it's so challenging to do right. They have that here. It's an amazingly dynamic pose. And then, of course, in having him square off against the Sentinel hand, the base actually is as important as the statue. And again, some people hate that. They don't want the statue to be able to the base. They just want the statue. They just want the character to focus on. There's nothing wrong with that. I respect that. But for me, I feel, again, that's something that's very simple. It's the infancy of statue collecting, of sculptural, sculpture as an art form. We've had all of that, again, 1/6, 1/4, 1/3. So many other companies do that. And it's easy to get, if you want something like that. So for me, the base makes these pieces. It's such a dynamic, powerful base, and it shows him landing and then destroying the Sentinel hand. And so you can now sculpt the entire Optic Blast. You sculpt the blast as a translucent resin. You can see that right here. And you can sculpt it from the eye as it explodes forward all the way into the hand. You show the effect of the Optic Blast on the hand, and then you show the explosion, both the front and the back. And if all of that just kind of comes together, it's a amazing effect, you know. And so again, this Cyclops, in my opinion, is definitely one of the best Cyclops ever designed. And that's what you go to groups for. That's what they pay the statue companies like Sideshow and XM and Prime One. That's who you're paying the designers for. Is that ingenious idea. Like, you know, we've been, statue collecting now is no longer, I think, a young profession or a young hobby. It's got a couple of decades, and with all these characters, a lot has been done. So to come up with something unique, something striking, it really is not the easiest thing to do. And that's why I have to get more and more ambitious. And with the ambition, there comes certain issues, which we can get into and talk about as a philosophical discussion. But that's what sets great designers apart from, you know, good ones and then mediocre ones, is how ambitious are you? How crazy, in a sense, are you willing to do? Are you willing to go? Are you going to come up with a design that's just completely nonsensical, where you come up with it in your mind and then you draw it out, but then it has to be sculpted, it has to be molded, it has to be cast, it has to be painted, then you have to sell it, and it can't be $10,000. Those are all things that you have to balance. And so the producer has always had a very, very special vision. In my opinion, at least for me, about, I would say, over 85–90% of the time, his vision is something I absolutely love and it speaks to me. The other 10 to 15%, it's like, okay, you know, I just shrug, it doesn't do as much for me. But he continually, you know, kind of keeps hitting things out of the ballpark in terms of him taking maybe a tried and true, you know, concept, and then just tweaking it and expanding it to a point that makes it amazing. So when you talk about design, you have to give credit to somebody who's able to solve the mystery of Cyclops. He solved the difficulty of Cyclops, at least in my point of view. And he created a piece that a lot of people, you know, who own it, they're going to agree this is the best Cyclops ever designed, okay? Because of that, because it looks so amazing. You are now seeing in sculptural form an Optic Blast destroying a Sentinel hand, and that's something that's never really been done at this scale, and it takes something of this scale to show it. Never been done before, so you got to give credit to that. Okay. Moving on from the design stage to the sculpt, we can appreciate the sculpt a little bit later on when I take, you know, the phone off and begin to go looking at it in detail. But typical Franco form, insane amounts of detail, beautiful base, wonderful, you know, metallic, you know, Sentinel effect, and then you really have to get close enough to appreciate the fact of the circuitry and the ripped, damaged hand. You can see the inside of it, the metallic tendons where it's supposed to connect, and the metal as he slices right through. You know, he did a good job with the explosion. I don't think, honestly, there's any real great way of sculpting explosion. You're trying to sculpt gas and fire and those type of things. Even worse than an Optic Blast to sculpt. But again, in terms of the design, a beautiful way of trying to recreate that explosion, and then Franco pulled it off amazingly. And then for you to again see the you know, what the internal metallic tendons and nerves and metal of a Sentinel's hand, or what it would look like in the middle, is just beautiful. So hopefully, you know, you can, as I slowly rotate it, you know, you have the opportunity to kind of see how beautiful this is from afar. So that's why it makes reviewing this piece so difficult, is you want to appreciate it from far and near. And so the review has to go in two stages. The first stage, far away, so you can appreciate the whole piece and the relationship of the piece to a human being. And then later on, going a little bit more, you know, detail to look at the detailed parts of the sculpture. But then you'll never be able to appreciate the whole thing. And this piece, I think, is very important for you to appreciate the entire, you know, effect of it. You know, so I'm looking at this right now. And again, all of these pieces are like center pieces. I mean, unfortunately, you can't do that unless you're a millionaire, but they all usually deserve their own room, like a museum where you put them in the center, you can walk around it because you catch so many things in so many different angles, you know. So this is like one of the best angles for me to see, like almost looking over his shoulder, and you can see the damage to the hand. You can see the blast running right across. It's a beautiful effect, okay? So the sculpt is fantastic. Now we come to the paint job. As far as the paint, this is a factory paint job, so obviously not custom. I think the factory paint is very, very good. They usually don't make more than about 60 of these, with another 10 to 15 artist proofs for the producer and the painter and the factory to keep. In my opinion, when I look at the detail of the base, the rock, you know, the stone, you know, being crushed, there's even a translucent water coming off the pipe here, which you can see these little details. Over here, there's even a little rat coming out of the little sewer down here. I don't know if you can see it from this far away, but I'll show you close-ups later on. As far as all of that painting, the weathering of the hand, the metallic finish, it all looks fantastic. In terms of the actual Cyclops himself, again, beautiful detailing. You can see the tiny fabric. Again, I'll show you all of this in a little bit detail later on, but you can actually see all the little tiny, you know, weathering and the stretch of the fabric. All of this stuff is sculpted beautifully, all of his pouches, and then painted beautifully as well. So I don't have any complaints about the statue in terms of, again, appreciating the paint. Now, there's been some criticism and controversy in terms of the actual face, or the face itself. And again, I think in that respect, you have to understand where you're coming from. If you're like one of these collectors, I think if you love a museum pose, then obviously for a museum pose statue, everything matters, because certainly you're getting nothing when it comes to the pose. He's just standing there, he's doing this, or he's doing this, or he's doing this. The pose gives you nothing. And so if the pose gives you nothing, you have to be very, very sort of demanding when it comes to the details of the fabric, the quality of the sculpt, and the paint. That all has to be perfect, because there's nothing else there other than that. When you take away a dynamic pose and the character is just standing there, then the paint and the sculpt becomes a lot more important. For a piece like this, look at this, you know, you're seeing an Optic Blast in real time. This blast is such that you can't see the face at all. You can tell that, you know, he's screaming. You can tell that his mouth is open, but it basically obscures the entire face. So for this, the paint job on the face then becomes less important, because it's essentially invisible. When you appreciate it even from less than a foot away with the proper shadows, it looks, you know, fantastic. Now, one of the things about this is that this producer does like to give, as with many companies actually, they like to give different switch outs. I've talked in the past about my opinion about switch outs. In general, I don't love them. I understand the reason for them. The reason obviously is to give you a choice, give the collector choices, so you can put different heads, different arms, different poses. I might make a separate video going into more detail about why I don't like that. I think it increases the cost, you know, and again, for the vast majority of people, there's only one or two heads that you're gonna pose, and everything else, you just don't know where to put them. It becomes a mess, you know, of unused limbs. So he gives you 4 heads, each one for different reasons. These 2 heads, for instance, are essentially identical. The only difference is that one of them you can hook the Optic Blast into to create this similar effect, and the other one is to be displayed without the Optic Blast. He also gives you, as a neat little Easter egg, the old classic Cyclops head, which of course I understand does not fit the modern Jim Lee costume at all. But again, I'm not greedy. I mean, this is like an Easter egg. It's sort of like a little wink and a thank you. He took the trouble to actually, you know, to actually give that to you as a display option. So I'm grateful. The batteries are a little bit weak. You have to be careful. So it lights up very nicely. I'll show you the light up a little bit later. So I realized, yes, it doesn't go with the costume, but at the same time, it's appreciated. It's again a callback to the old, so-called classic X-Men. And then of course you have the one that I would guess that 90% of people are going to display, which is the Jim Lee version here with the visor literally exploding from the force of the Optic Blast. So what is it about what is controversial? Well, what's controversial is that the paint job of the lower face, they're trying to give him like a 5 o'clock shadow, a little bit of a dirty, sort of dirty beard, and the execution of the factory was less than desirable. I think that actually the classic head is quite a bit better. I don't see anything wrong with that. They did a good job there. And I actually think this head is pretty good as well, but this head is a little bit dark, does lack a bit of texturing, does lack a good paint job. It creates the effect that Cyclops essentially is like a lazy paint job. So instead of putting the texturing, the shading, the detailing, it just looks like somebody just took some darker color and just slapped it on a little bit. And so it makes it look like, again, that he's burned or something. I think some of the jokes were that the bottom half of his face is like burned to a crisp or something like that. Which I think it's a little bit mean. It's easy, but that's what social media for you. I think it's a little bit mean, but the criticism foundationally, I think, is fair. Okay, if you look closely, the paint job is lacking. Okay, and this factory has turned out better paint jobs, and as a matter of feedback, they should understand that the quality there should be better. For what's being paid, there should be better quality delivered. At the same time, we get into a problem where when you look at the majesty of the whole piece and then to essentially make fun of it or rip it apart, in my opinion, the best Cyclops ever done from design to sculpt to paint. Remember, you're making fun of the lower jawline, where now that you hopefully look at this piece, it just doesn't make any difference. Like, you just can't see it. It's like making fun of the undersurface. It's like nitpicking on the undersurface of a Lamborghini or something like that. There's a horrible paint on the undersurface of your Ferrari, LaFerrari, or the Bugatti Veyron on the bottom has a little scratch right on the bottom. So, is it fair criticism? It is fair criticism, but functionally speaking, it just doesn't make a difference. And you can take pictures of it, and with a flash, it makes it look even more horrible. But under natural lighting, under display, I just can't imagine anybody who bought the piece, anybody who owns the piece, who would care about that. Because if you own the piece and you display the piece and you show it to your friends and your family, you'll understand that that's not what the statue is about, and that the deficiency in the detailing of Cyclops in a lower face simply can't show up, because in general, the whole point of this piece is to show the Optic Blast. And I hope that when I spent so much time talking about the design and the inspiration, you understand that everything else is just basically Easter eggs. Today is Easter, by the way, Easter Sunday, so it's appropriate I made that connection. But the whole point is this is what you are going to display. Okay, this is the actual statue, and all these other heads are just basically Easter eggs. They're bonuses, they're extras to give a little bit more added value to the piece. And therein, I think, lies the mistake that not only this producer made, but that all producers and all companies make, is this hot toysification of statues. I believe that statues should be works of art. I think statues should aspire to art. And art, there needs to be a singularity of vision. And in my opinion, I don't want a David with different arms. I don't want a Mona Lisa that's smiling and then you take the bottom part of her face off, you put a Mona Lisa that's laughing and another Mona Lisa that's like, frowning. Great art means that the artist has a vision, he executes the vision, and if you love it, you love it. If you don't, you don't, because you can't please everyone, and he doesn't want to please everyone. He wants to please himself. And so I think a lot of statues, because there's such a huge, I think, fan base for Hot Toys, I think it's going toward that too much so. If, for instance, the producer had just said that this is my vision and kept it, there really wouldn't be as many complaints about the bottom half, because again, you can't see the bottom half of his face. Even if it wasn't painted, it's going to be shielded by the Optic Blast. And when the light hits it and it goes through that red and there's a shadow underneath, it's already perfect the way it is. You can't see it, okay? But he created other versions where you don't have the Optic Blast, then it gets kind of awkward, and then what happens, of course, is you have these heads, and that's where the criticism comes in, because there are some problems, obviously, with the execution. But you could have avoided it completely by just simply not giving us any options to begin with and just keeping it like this. And you could have saved maybe a little bit of money, because you wouldn't have to both mold and cast and paint all these different heads. They all have electronics in them. They all have button batteries. They all have light. So it's a little bit of a mess, okay? So that's kind of my riff on no good deed going unpunished when it comes to that criticism. For a small amount of money, you can definitely have each of these heads repainted. It's not difficult, and I know people who can do a fantastic job and make him look amazing. I'm not sure if I want to do that or not, because at the end of the day, it matters so little, and I don't want to spend money on, for instance, a portrait that I'm never ever going to display, or that I'm going to display essentially for this review, and then they'll never be put there again. I had similar problems with the Psylocke versus Sentinel, also from the same producer. Again, 4 heads, I think, and in my opinion, 3 heads too many. The Rogue that's going to come out is I think the worst example. And when I first joined the group, I was guilty of this myself, because I was just like, I wanted everything, and the producer said it's going to cost more money. What do you want? And of course, the whole majority of us, I think, very stupidly chose the maximum. But the Rogue statue, Rogue versus Sentinel, has 7 heads. I mean, that's insane. Why did we go for 7 heads? There's no reason for 7 heads. Just give us 1 or 2 amazing ones, or just 1, and that's it. So that's my take on the controversy. The main criticism, which is not really like I said, anybody who owns the piece understands how absolutely silly that criticism is. I absolutely feel like I got my money's worth, every penny's worth from this work of art, and these heads are fine. If I want to throw down another $100, $200 and get it painted nicely, maybe I will. But I'm, again, to be honest with you, disinclined to do that, because there's only one head that I really want to display it with in this setting, and that head, the 5 o'clock shadow is not done the best. You'll never see the 5 o'clock shadow, because there will be real shadow on it. So that's as far as it goes, how I feel about the paint. Overall, I think the paint is an A+. Okay, and then again, where the factory fell short on is the 5 o'clock shadow, but functionally it just doesn't matter. But still, I think the president of the factory, is listening. You should know that quality is disappointing, and I do believe that you're better than that. You've shown better than that, and that's something that you should take to heart. I mean, that quality control should not have passed. It's your job to look at that, and if you don't understand that, you have to have somebody else double check it, because universally that's something that's not great. Okay, that's a shortcut that shouldn't have been taken with this piece. But again, functionally, it doesn't really matter. So I think I've talked enough about just my feelings about the piece. What else is there to address? Another thing about this piece is about ambition, and I'll talk about that a little bit more with the Iceman versus Sentinel, which is waiting in the wings to be reviewed. But there's, again, some controversy, some posts that our producer put in that was taken, I think, unfairly out of context and then posted to certain Facebook groups to, again, stir drama and controversy, which is about damage, to the statue. So again, understand that with great ambition, there's going to be great risk. You create a museum pose, and it's really easy to make. Okay, it's easy to sculpt, easy to mold and cast and put together, and easy to package. I think 95, 97% of the time it's going to get you with no damage. I want you to look at this. Look at this thing, and you tell me how you're going to guarantee that it's going to get to the person without any damage, without anything. You have optic beams, you got little tiny pieces here, there, you got blast, Sentinel hand, and it's just ridiculous, right? And so, he said, look, within reason, these pieces are ridiculously expensive to make, hard to package. You can't look at one little tiny break that you don't want to super glue and then demand like a full refund. You want them to ship an entire base. You can't. To ship the base here would cost like $300. To make another base would cost, basically the producer would go bankrupt and there would be no point in making these pieces. The factory can't give you an entire base because one little thing broke. And so for that reason, if the head is a problem, they'll send replacement. If the arm is a problem, they'll send replacement. I'll go into the beam a little bit later, but they sent me replacement beams because there were some issues with it. They'll send it no problem. But if you want like an entire base, that's going to be, you have to have a very good reason. The base has to be demolished in order for them to do that. And that's something I think is common sense. This is a custom company. They're not Sideshow. This guy is not worth $50 million or $40 million. He's not buying licenses from Disney. Okay, he's doing it out of passion. He doesn't live in a mansion. He doesn't own like tigers and lions on chains. He's not Scarface, and so he asks basically for you to be reasonable. And I think that's fair. If it's a little tiny piece, you glue it, you touch it up, nobody sees it. It's fine. This is not the sort of thing that I buy with the idea that I'm going to flip it for $500 or $1,000 profit. I can't sell this thing for $3,000, for $4,000. I can't ship it for $1,000. So it looks amazing. And unless there's something really, really wrong, we're going to work with that. You have to have different standards for that. And if you want to appreciate someone who's going to go well above and beyond and give you a piece that nobody has even thought about this. Nobody can even think of this. There's no Cyclops, custom or licensed, that comes close to the ambition of this piece. So if you want that type of ambition, you have to be more understanding that in getting to you there could be some issues. Okay, I'm lucky, in the sense that all these pieces have very few issues, no issues that I felt was unacceptable, and he is very responsive, very polite. I've never had a problem communicating with him, and he did set out to take care of me and take care of me very nicely. If he can't take care of me, he will pay, for the piece to be repaired at your area. But again, I've been fortunate in that I've never had to have that happen. So this is, again, not something that's been an issue. So I think I covered all of the major areas of controversy with this piece. So let's take a look at the nitty-gritty. So he comes with 2 arms, okay, and then 4 heads, and he also comes with 2 Optic Blasts. So the Optic Blast here is the one that I prefer, which is the more powerful one. It shows him, again, it shows the blast coming out and destroying the visor. There's one here that actually has the visor intact, and then it has the blast obviously coming like this down. Hopefully you can see that. So it shows you the visor intact. Okay, so that's one potential switch out. I like him with the iconic left finger activating the blast, but there's one alternate switch out hand that just kind of shows him like this. I'll pose for that as well. And then you have, of course, the cute little head from the original classic, X-Men when he debuted. And then you have this head, which frankly I don't even understand at all. This is just a head with no Optic Blast at all. So this is, I guess, the Jim Lee head. So you have like the Jim Lee head with the visor being destroyed and the Optic Blast coming out. You have the Jim Lee head with the visor intact and the Optic Blast coming out. And then you have the Jim Lee head with no Optic Blast coming out. Those are the three versions of this head. And then you have the Easter egg head. So those are all the switch hats. So I think I'll start with I already showed you kind of what he looks like here, okay? And how should I do this? So there are light up features as well, okay? So what I'm gonna do then is, let me show you sort of what he looks like this, and then I'm going to, what's the best way of doing this? I think what I'll do is I'll show the different versions of him, and then I'll start turning the light effects on. The light effects, as you can imagine, not something I turn on very often. It drains the batteries like crazy. You can do it literally in a night. And so I'm not, super, motivated to do that, but I want to showcase all of it. And I'll do it in real time without any cuts, so you can see kind of how I put things together. So anyways, this is version 1, my favorite version, my preferred display version, okay? So another way you can display it, okay, is you can switch the left arm out. So here's the left arm. We're going to gently take it off. And then we're going to put the other arm in. They're all magnetized. And so now this is what he looks like with the other left arm. That's with the fist. Again, it mirrors the right arm. And yeah, it's cool. Like I said, it's just sort of showing him Optic Blast. I'm going to just kind of gently turn him around so you can appreciate him from all the different angles. Really nice. So hopefully you can see the arm, okay? Just like that. So that's the other arm. And then we can take this off and we'll show the alternate Optic Blast without the visor exploding. So the way you do this is, I like to remove the arm because I don't want this to fall off by accident. And then you actually take the whole head and you gently slide it over and out. And you get rid of the head. There's a little bit of give to the laser, to this blast. And now when you remove the head, you slide it right out. Okay, so that's how you get rid of the blast. So how to put the blast in is you take your other head and you line it up first to make sure you know what you're doing here. And then the first thing you do is you slide the blast in its slot right here. You go all the way in, and again, this blast, once in position, once there's a slot down there, you have some give. So once you do that, you then put it into the head, and then you essentially then move the statue, and you connect it like that, and you create that bridge between the visor and the blast. So in this case, we're going to put on the outstretched arms right here. So this is what he looks like now with the visor intact. So here you go. So in my opinion, hold on a second. I made a little bit of a mistake putting that in. That's not the way it's supposed to be. His head's coming apart a little bit. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to do. Hold on a second here. Like Murphy's Law, when I'm doing it in real time. So that's why you see that you don't want that thing to be on here when you're fiddling with it. It takes a little bit of fiddling. Hold on a second. Sometimes you want to make sure that you have it actually in the right orientation. Okay, so I made a mistake, obviously, that I had the laser upside down. So you have to check it, because if you don't have it done correctly, it won't fit and you have a problem. So you see how like the arm kind of almost toppled down? That was almost a disaster. Luckily, there was no damage. But you don't want the arm here when you're fiddling with the head. Okay, so anyways, this is what he looks like without the visor exploding. So it's a subtle difference, but you know, again, you can tell that there is a difference. So again, you know, from the perspective of seeing the statue from about 2 to 3 feet away, I doubt that you would be able to tell that there's any problems with the 5 o'clock shadow on his lower face. I'm looking at it right now from about a foot away, to, 18 inches away. He still looks fantastic. I'm looking at him from behind, the hand. He's going all the way down, looks great, okay? So this is one version, one display version. Let's take the arm down. Let's put the finger, so now you can see what he looks like here. And again, hoping you can appreciate sort of the panoramic view to see it in Gestalt. There you go, okay? So that's with the Optic Blast without the visor being destroyed. So now we're gonna just go with the regular heads. Again, take the arm off, and then we'll just sort of gently lift the head up. You move the statue a little bit, take the head off, and then get that Optic Blast out. So before continuing, let me show you these two Optic Blasts. These were the ones that I originally got, and I never even displayed it with this. I just displayed it with this guy because, again, I love this so much, with the whole visor. You can see the pieces of visor on the side, everything's exploding. And, over a long period of time, I would say over about the better part of 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month, the clear translucent resin began to bend just a little bit, just because remember that this is the bridge connecting the actual blast with Cyclops himself, and there's pressure there. And so over time, it actually began to bend a little bit. And I did talk to the producer about it, and he was very gracious, no problems. He said, yeah, that is something that can happen to a few of the Cyclops just because of the positioning of the feet, and there's these minute differences of where the feet is positioned on each individual Cyclops and how it connects to the blast. And so he had the factory actually cast up another set of translucent resin that's just a little bit thicker. You can see that the color is a little bit darker, and that's gonna hold its position, hold its shape. It's not gonna bend. But the bend itself actually was very easy. What I did was, after I noticed it, I just basically took a blow dryer to it, and it just kind of slowly bent again, and it went back into its nice straight position. In fact, when you just lay it, even without blow drying, you just lay it on a table, over time, it kind of slowly went back into its original shape anyways. But when I used the blow dryer, it went there a lot faster, a lot quicker, so there's no problem. So this is actually like pretty darn straight. So again, it just goes to show you that, he takes care of you very easily, very nicely. There's never been a problem with that. Very, very good, customer service. So that's why I have 2 pairs. And I think I will tend to just, display with this just to see if this bends as much. I can feel it's a little bit more easy to move than the other ones, a little bit thicker. But I kind of like the translucency of this a little bit better. So it's more translucent, which is better for the light effect. So if I want to demonstrate a light effect, for instance, for this review, I would use the more translucent version, but for display, I would use the other one, which is a little bit darker. And that's what I'm going to use 99% of the time. Okay, so now we're left without the Optic Blast, and we have a couple heads for that. So here's the head. Basically, you just put it here, and then you do that. So now the story changes. You're basically seeing the after effect of the blast. This to me, is a little bit weaker. It still has that great dynamic pose. Take a look. So there's still a dynamic pose, and you're seeing the after effect of the hand almost being sliced, and you're seeing this explosion, and you have to just imagine that he just finished, he just finished his Optic Blast. It's still good, it's still cool, I still love it, but I think, again, it's the Optic Blast that really makes this piece. I hope you agree with that. So here you go again. By the way, there might be some concern of the statue leaning over time. Another reason why it's really important to have a very good Optic Blast with some, with some sturdiness to it. That's why they recast it in a little bit thicker translucent resin material, the translucent material, because that blast actually holds him up, and you have a very, very thick metal rod in the feet. And so between the metal rod and the Optic Blast having some strength, you're not going to have Cyclops lean, okay? And that's also why I would never display him by himself like this, because there might be a concern over time that he might lean. Although again, you would reduce the chance of that by having good quality resin, like a good resin on this left leg, and then a sturdy metal rod, which we have. So here you go, taking a look at him. Just, what you're hearing, by the way, is the weight of this thing on my wooden table and the turntable. So again, taking a look, that's the pose that we're looking at. And then let's put on the other arm to see if, I think if you don't have the Optic Blast coming out, then this is the arm you want to use. It makes more sense to see him like this, okay? Just landing with one foot on the ground. Great action pose, a lot of power. This is very similar to Cyclops poses elsewhere in other companies. And then he's just basically finished using the Optic Blast and torn the hand in half. You can see the after effects of the explosion. Okay, so here this makes more sense. If you take this arm off and you decide to put this arm on, it looks a little bit, in my opinion, it looks a bit more awkward, because it's like, well, what the heck are you doing, Cyclops? It's like, you got the finger on there, did you just turn the blast off? I mean, I guess that's how you can interpret the action at this point. He's just turned the blast off, and then you're seeing the effects of it. But normally, I like to associate, this action with the blast actually happening, okay? So when you don't see the blast itself, you just see this, I think it looks a little bit more awkward to me. But again, you can create any narrative in your mind, but this is the other display option. So you can imagine with 2 arms, and then 4 heads, 2 arms, and then 2 Optic Blasts. There's a ton of different display options. But again, in my opinion, there's one that's so clearly head and shoulders above that's what you're going to put in your display cabinet, if you had to. And again, in this case, the poor paint job on the lower half of the face is definitely more appreciable because of that, because you don't have the Optic Blast hiding it, you don't have the natural shadows hiding it. So this is an area where if you were going to display it, you would probably want to invest in having that repainted and done a little bit better, okay? And then finally, the last option, which, again, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm never ever going to display them with this head, is the classic head right over here. I'm going to put this on, and then we're going to put that right here. So now you see classic Cyclops, which if you're a purist, you're gonna complain because you're gonna say, well, this makes no sense. He has a classic portrait with a Jim Lee costume, right? So I guess if you're one of those glass half empty kind of guys, you'll say, well, this looks ridiculous. But from my point of view, I really like it. I mean, I think it gives you a different look. It's a bonus, and it's nice. I mean, I quite enjoy the sort of the different look. And this is the best, by the way, the best painted lower half. I don't know if I would even commission someone to do it differently. So here you go here. But again, I would never display this unless I was doing a review or something like that. And then of course, one more option, take the hand off and put this thing on like this, and then gives you one more look, okay? All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I've shown you basically all the different combinations, right? All 4 heads, Optic Blasts, different hand positions. So now I'm going to demonstrate the lighting, okay? Demonstrate the light effects. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on all the different lights. So the way we are going to achieve the light effect is that all the heads light up and then the 2 blasts individually light up. So this is the same challenge that Sideshow had when they first had the Star Wars premium formats. And as you know, a lot of the Star Wars premium formats are Jedi with lightsabers, everything from Shakti to Anakin and Obi-Wan and Luke. And the big design challenge was, how are you going to make that lightsaber look good when lit up? And early going, it didn't look good, okay? You can't get around that. It looked not very good because they didn't have the technology, and so the fiber optic light was only at the base and maybe the tip, and it was just a very poor lightsaber. And then as they got better, they figured out a way to make the entire lightsaber light up, and the light got better, and there was more glow, and it just looked awesome, okay? So that's with a very tiny little lightsaber, like yay big, okay, on a premium format. So for you to get the actual light effect is a lot more complicated. So essentially what happens is you have a nice light up effect on the blasts. That's easy to light up. There's translucent shards. So they light up, and then there's enough light to go up a little bit of the optic blast, and then the light from the head goes down a little bit, and in very dark, dim lighting, everything just sort of glows, and it gives you that, again, that blast effect, okay? But there's going to be brighter near the source of the light, and the middle will be a little bit dim. There won't be as much light in the center. I mean, obviously, could you have tried to create a weird situation where the whole thing, like this whole thing lights up? You could, but I think it would have been a nightmare to design in terms of how do you get the even light throughout the entire thing. It's, in my opinion, impossible for this scale and for what we're looking for here. Like, it's not a little tiny. I mean, this whole thing would have to be an LED. You would have to have wires connection. It would have been a disaster. Okay, so this is the best we could do. And again, I don't use light up. The majority, you just can't display it with light up. For the Iceman, by the way, there was a little light function. I put my batteries in there, and just out of curiosity, I kept it on and just wanted to see how long it would take before the batteries will all drain. I put, I think, 5 AAA batteries. It took 48 hours. So with the light going, 48 hours, it destroyed 5 AAA batteries, drained the entire thing. So again, that just tells you an idea of the practicality of displaying these with light. I think they're great to showcase to a friend or family member, or maybe for the purposes of a YouTube video, you want to show the full effect. But when you're displaying in the cabinet where you got this thing, again, in its final form, you're not going to use the light, okay? So I'm going to start by just turning on the lights here first. So these are very strongly magnetized. So we're going to put, what am I doing here? So we're going to put this back where it belongs. Okay, so this is lit up, and then we're gonna take this off. We're going to turn the light on here. Ooh, gotta be careful here. It's like there's a space for it, and it tends to turn the light off, so I have to be a little bit careful how I put it in there. It's a little tricky. A little frustrating. And then I'm going to turn his light on right here. Okay. And again, the batteries sometimes have to be replaced, you know how that goes. So this is the one that drives me the craziest because there's a space for it, and then it doesn't do it very well. Okay, this will have to do here. Okay, so that's set. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the lights a little bit so that you can appreciate it more, hopefully. Right here, you can't see anything. Okay, so here we go. So hopefully it's dim enough that you can actually begin to see the actual light itself. So you can see the light here. Let me see if that actually shows up. It shows up okay, not the best. So this is where it gets awkward because I have to go back and forth to sort of let you see the lighting, but here hopefully you're beginning to get an appreciation of the light itself and how it works. I'm going to turn on the light here now. Okay, so there you have it. So that's what it looks like with the lighting effect. So this part here doesn't change, and then you just kind of switch out the heads as you go along, okay? Again, let me see how well you can see the light. See from here, it's not quite as easy for you guys to see. Here you go. Okay, so next step is to show you the other head with no Optic Blast. So I'm going to take this head off, turn it off, and we'll take this head off, turn it on. So I'm going to go close up. Very close up so you can actually see that's the light, okay? And then we're going to put this on here. So now you can take a look at what he looks like this. And then I'm going to turn the lights off. So you have a little bit more mood lighting. This is in the dark, you can see kind of again the brightness of the blast, as well as the actual light inside the head. So this gives you again a little bit of an example of what we're talking about. Okay, so now we're going to do the blast, okay? So we're gonna take this off, turn it off. So this is the part that's gonna be tricky. I'm gonna turn the light on here. And then we're going to make sure that I do this right. So first of all, I'm gonna get this arm off. I'm gonna take this on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this in first. We're gonna put this thing on like that. And then we're going to put it on like this. And then we're gonna put this arm on like that. So then we're going to turn this light off. And so I'm going to put this in profile view. You can see that it does absolutely light up right here. So this is the profile view. So I hope you can tell that you can see that it's definitely a lot brighter at the source than in the center. But in real life, it looks great. I'm going to turn on background light so you can see it a little bit better. So it comes across really nicely when I take a picture. But again, hopefully you can appreciate the light up from him all the way to that. Yeah, I can see it. I think you can see the light pretty nicely. So there you have it. So I think this is the best view of the effect, okay? And then finally, let's show my preferred display option, which is the exploding visor. So again, we're gonna take off the arm. We don't want that to fall. And then we're going to gently lift up, slide over, take that off. And then we're gonna take this thing off. You can see how bright this is right here because it's actually has to be bright enough to actually go down the Optic Blast. Turn that off. So this is the head right here. We're going to turn it on. Okay, so again, we're going to position the Optic Blast, put it against the eye, and then we're going to slide it gently into the head. We'll adjust, put the arm back on. There you go. And so here's the light again, this time with the visor on, just like this. So again, a good try. I do like the light, but as you can imagine, what you really want in terms of the effect is you would prefer to have the light all the way down, right? But then again, that would have been just impossible because you would have to have LEDs throughout the entire thing. And then it would look great with the lights on, but it wouldn't look as good with the lights off because you can see the little LEDs and the strips and the translucency. So, there's only so much you can do with the power of the light. But I think it still looks aces to me, and I'm going to turn off the lights one last time so you can get an appreciation of what it looks like in the dark. So when it's completely in the dark, you can definitely appreciate, the line a little bit more. in person, it looks fantastic because you can actually see it glowing. The Optic Blast as it comes out of his visor that's shattering it, you can see that glowing, and of course you can see the rest of it glowing as well. Okay, so I'm just going to turn him around. So again, you get to see the glow from all the different sides. Right here is a very nice touch. And then again, you see that this is kind of the best angle to see it at. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the lights here now. So this is it. This is Cyclops versus Sentinel. You've now seen the light effects in all its different ways, and the blast and all of that. So I'm going to turn all this off, and then I'm going to turn on the lights, and then I'm going to take off the iPhone camera and give you some detailed shots. Okay. Okay, so simple enough. Let's go take this off. And then again, very carefully get the head off. And get this thing off right here. And we're going to turn off the light. Put this back. I'm going to take this off. Turn it off. Okay. And then down here, take off. And then same thing. So I'm going to put this aside. And then we're going to put on the heavier. Optic Blast, where I don't think the light would go as far, but it's definitely a lot stronger. Okay. So we're going to do that. So again, you slide the Optic Blast in first. Put it into his head. You put the head in here. You put the arm right over here. Yep, nicely done. Okay. So I'm going to twirl him around one more time. Hopefully you can, I don't know if you can see and compare whether you can tell the difference, whether the Optic Blast here is a little bit thicker, a little bit stronger, a little bit straighter. It's a subtle change, because again, I think I bent the old one pretty nicely back, but this is sort of a cleaner, straighter line, and this should not bend or warp over time. So I'm going to give it one more nice little turnaround so you get a feel for this. This is the heavier Optic Blast that was shipped to me as a replacement. Right here, very nice. Okay. Okay, so let me disengage the camera. I don't want to screw this up. And I'm going to cut the video because I'm going to have to change the orientation, and then I'm going to give you the close-ups, okay? So here we go. Okay, so welcome back to the cut. So we'll start with close-up of all of the different portraits You can decide for yourself whether this is acceptable or not. So here is the classic Cyclops. Beautiful detail on the teeth. You know, it's like glistening. You can see the tongue. Quite happy with this. And then you take this off. That's where the batteries go and all that. So here you have the classic pose, the classic portrait. This is the one where you can see that there's no opening. And so this is, again, the portrait without the Optic Blast. So this is what people are talking about, kind of the lazily painted shadow down here. Okay. Again, it doesn't look as bad when you have natural lighting. Obviously, if you put it under bright flashlight, it looks a lot worse. But we have natural mood lighting, shadows. It's okay, but it can be better, for sure. This is the other face now, snarling. So there are little changes in expression. Again, I'm pretty impressed with the detailing of the lips, the gums, and then you can see that this is completely open. That's where we put the Optic Blast on him. But the visor, as you can see, is intact. Okay. Yeah, very nice. Again, the paint is not, horrible. Again, under normal situations, normal lighting, if you don't flash it. And then just kind of giving you an idea of the details of the arm. Nicely painted, no problems. Very good. Okay. So now that we got the heads out of the way, we can take a look at the base. So here you can see that this is the sliced off thumb. This is like a little detail that's so amazing that he did this. We didn't have to, but yet they did, which is essentially a pipe, broken pipe with water spilling down. This is also translucent as well, as you can see. So just a wonderful little detail that absolutely is not necessary, but adds so much. And he just added it in there. So it's nice, and it just shows you again water coming out. So it's a great effect. And then I want you to kind of appreciate the texturing of the base, the rock, all of that, which is beautifully done in my opinion. Quite impressed with that. So here again is the metallic thumb sliced off. You can see that. And then this is Cyclops with one leg landing. And then here you have this little rat right here. Nice and cute. So these are the little touches that make this piece so special, right? You got the water out of a split pipe or a burst pipe. In the sewer, you have this little rat standing here. And then up top, this gigantic Sentinel hand. And here's explosion, both here and here. And then you can see that bridge all the way up, connecting it to his face. So he's screaming, as you can see. And you can see that the visor is exploding. Beautifully done. Great detail. And then here, of course, is the back end. I'm going to stand up, show you sort of the back end. Different poses, different viewpoints. So here's all the thumbs. Here's the huge hand. And then this is my favorite part. Of course, you can see all of the detail of the sliced off thumb right here, all the circuitry. And then here, nice shot of the gaping hole that was created by the Optic Blast. Look at all of the detail on the inside of this. Really, really nice. Then backing up, you can see the finger right here. that got sliced off here. And then look at the view here. And look at the damage done by the blast. So again, a lot of detailing on the inside, all the metal. I think this is a really, really nice shot right here. Look at that. And then backing off, you can actually see that, you know, he's about to slice the entire hand in half. Very nice. And then let's take a look at Cyclops himself. Look at all the detailing here, all the texturing. Very, very nice. Here's his costume. And again, I mean, to be fair, I think there are Cyclops by other companies that's, you know, got a little bit more detail with the costume, etc. But when you consider the actual piece itself and the fact that he's just one part of an entire diorama, then, you know, this is still amazing detail, amazing quality for Cyclops himself. And then showing you again the actual visor. You can see the visor being burst asunder by the Optic Blast and the energy, and then just like basically completely coming out, being broken right here. So very, very nice effects. And then all the way down to the actual blast itself. Just genius, really. Try to get to that view right here. And then down here. We can't really see because, again, the blast is in the way, but here's the mouth screaming. Great effect. And then, of course, backing up, the Gently costume, the belt pouches, all of that. I'm gonna turn them again one more time. You get to see that on this side. Really, really nice. And then a quick little preview of Iceman versus set on the background, which is amazing. Okay, so there you have it. I'm gonna back up a little bit. Here, I think this is probably the best way to do it. Have him go here, and then I'll just walk around to the other side of the table. So this is it. Cyclops versus Sentinel in all his glory. So thanks for sticking out with me all the way to the end if you were crazy enough to do so. But you know, there's a lot, as you can see. Hopefully you appreciate that, and at the end of all of this, there's just so much to this statue, like so much to talk about. I could talk all day about it, and I think I actually already have talked all day about it, but there's so many things about it, right? Like, again, the ambition, the design, the sculpt, the paint, the controversies, and then of course the different switch house, the different light up options, the different heads, the thinking about it, the different arms, the different poses, the fact that you have a little rat at the bottom, which is so hilarious, the fact that he's putting a translucent water effect where there was really no reason at all to do it, just for the sake of being more realistic or adding that extra touch that makes it, you know, what it is. The amazing effect of that torn hand. Here's the water dripping down, you know, coming out. So again, you know, in my opinion, the best Cyclops ever made. And the base does absolutely make a difference. Everything makes a difference. That Optic Blast makes a difference. The best executed Optic Blast I've ever seen. And the ultimate distillation of Cyclops and his mutant power. So I'm very, very pleased with it. I hope you have learned a lot more about this piece. And, you know, if you have an opportunity to get it, obviously, you know, I think you should. He's worth every bit, you know, that I paid for him. Understand that shipping is quite expensive. It's going to be, you know, anywhere from, I think, $600-700. He comes in a box that, you know, is heavier than furniture, essentially. And in order for, you know, somebody to break even selling it to you, they have to make back the shipping office that they pay. So, you know, I can't imagine this going for anything less than about $2,500 to maybe $3,000 shipped, including shipping. But it is, a work of art. And again, the best Cyclops, in my opinion, ever done, and the best depiction of an Optic Blast ever done. So take care, and until next time. I think I normally say, until next time, take care, but it's getting late, so I mixed it up. So until next time, take care, and I hope that you enjoyed this review of Cyclops versus Sentinel.